Last week I mentioned in my homily that November you can basically turn into three themes: saints, souls, and end times. Okay, we celebrate all saints, we celebrate all souls, and our readings as we get ready for a new year talk about the end times. Speaking of saints, we see saints in this church in statues, stained glass windows, and symbols. Mentioned to you before, everyone, symbols behind my chair, the 12 symbols, depict the 12 disciples. The outside four are the four gospel writers: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay? Symbols, statues. We see Mary, we see Joseph. And in stained glass windows, the one to the far left is St. John Vianney. The one next to it is St. Maria Goretti. It's amazing in a church, everyone, how we learn our faith. Symbols, statues, stained glass windows, and saints. And we hear in the first reading of today from the letter to the Hebrews that Jesus will come again. And when he comes again, everyone, we have to be clear about this last coming. It says this: he will not come to take away sins. He will come to take home those who eagerly await him. It's an interesting word, eagerly. Are we eager for Jesus' coming? I can honestly say sometimes I'm probably more eager than others. Not in a bad way. Sometimes when you look around the world and you see how things are going, you say, I can't wait for Jesus to come. But then lo and behold, everyone, life is pretty good. And so you say, you know something? Life is okay too. But that doesn't mean that I don't eagerly await Jesus' coming. I do. I can't wait for him to come and for his kingdom to ultimately reign. So let's remember, the first coming, Jesus came to take away sins. Second coming, not to take it away, but to take to him those who eagerly await him. Okay? Last Sunday we celebrated All Saints' Day. We heard the gospel of the Beatitudes. But if we were to actually hear the Sunday that All Saints' Day took the place of, and we led the gospel of that Sunday, we're going to hear about somebody familiar in the gospel of today. The scribe comes up to Jesus and asks Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus, of course, says, love God with all your mind, heart, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And in an extraordinary turn of events, the scribe turns to Jesus and says, you are right. Boy, we don't hear that very often, do we? You are right. Love God first with all your mind, heart, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus can say, this guy gets it. Not far from the kingdom of heaven. Well, everyone, lo and behold, the gospel of this week, we come back now not to a scribe, but to the scribes. And Jesus does not commend them today. Okay? You heard it in the first part of the gospel. Jesus is pretty tough on them. Why? They're all about show. They're show-offs. And they're harsh on people. And what's interesting in that first part of the gospel, the first segment, Jesus mentions one group of people. One and one only. And you know who he talks about? Widows. Widows. And what do the scribes do with the widows? They devour their houses. There it is. Widows. First reading, gospel. Let's look at both stories today. First reading of today, everyone, we hear the story of a widow. And let me tell you something. The life of a widow at the time of Jesus was tough. Okay? Women, you weren't the equal of men. You weren't perceived that way at the time of Jesus. I'm sorry, but that's the way it was. That meant it was almost impossible to get a job. And you were poor. Okay, but we hear in the first reading of today something even more extraordinary, everyone. We hear not only of a widow who's poor, but also everyone who's been overcome by a drought, who's down to the last meal. This is as low as it goes. And all of a sudden, along comes Elijah, and you would expect the prophet of God to give to this woman, but he doesn't. Here's what he does. Elijah goes up to her and says this, give me a drink. And as she turns to go, he says, "Oh, by the way, also bring me some food." And that's when the widow speaks. And the widow says this, "You know something? I'm gathering sticks. I'm going to cook the last meal. And with that, the jug and the jar will run dry." And Elijah says this, "It will not run dry. It will not. Go and have faith." But then, notice what he says, everyone. He still doesn't give. Notice what he says. "Make me a cake, then make one for you and your son." Interesting, isn't it? Testing. Still tests her. You give me first, and then get something for you and your son. What are we really saying? People, this is what we say. God is so giving, everyone, that if we connect ourselves anything to God, and we give and we give and we give, we will never run out. But the flip side of that is this. Turn something else into God, and we can understand this better, and hoard and hoard and hoard, and what happens, everyone? We never get enough. Right? Money, land, jobs. Hoard, 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 and you know something? We're always hungry. I want more. Well, how does the story goes? The woman believes, okay, she gives, and by golly, Elijah is right. Jar never runs dry. Jar never runs dry. She's able to eat for a year. Maybe there's something for us to learn there. Okay, let's look at the woman in the gospel of today. People, it wasn't long ago I was watching television, and there was a commentator on television that held up a sign. Okay, and the point I want to make here is how we tend to read into things. Okay, I don't remember the exact words on the piece of paper, but showed it to us and said, read it. And it said something like this: God's way is the way. Okay, that's what it read. So the person stopped people on the street and would ask them, what does the sign say? And they'd say, it says this: God's way is the way. Okay, and he said, are you sure? Read it again. Yes, God's way is the way. And then he would say this: you are not right. You're not right. Read it. And this is what it said: God's way is the way. You see, it's tricky. They put an extra "the" in the sentence to see if we catch it. And most of us didn't. We read things into things. And that's the danger of the gospel of today, everyone. We read something into the gospel that says today, Jesus is hard on the rich. No, he's not. It just says this: Jesus observes a treasury, and what does he notice? Some people putting in a lot of coins. It's a statement of fact. And the widow today, we often praise the widow of today. But here's something that maybe we've never even thought. Was she a cheerful giver? This is what we might have seen if we were there. She might have done this. Watch. There's a treasury. Got my 2 coins. It might have done. Maybe. I don't know. But in the end, plop, in they go. And what can Jesus say? She put in all she had. Okay. Now, we got to play the role here, though, of observer. That's what I want us to do here. We have to observe. People, when we observe, notice how we observe things so differently from Jesus. Okay, if we're the observer now, and we watch these people, and we watch them put in large amounts, we oftentimes say, well, they're generous. And we see this woman come up, and she puts in 2 coins, and we're not sure. We don't know. But what does Jesus say? Jesus says he gives everything. How does he know? How does he know? How can we be certain she doesn't have a pot of gold sitting under the bed at home? How do we know? Well, everyone, that's what makes Jesus different. If I pulled out a heart and I said, here's a heart, the difference between Jesus and you and us is pretty easy. We can look at a heart. Jesus can look into it. Into the heart. And that is why, everyone, when it comes to the woman, we're not certain. But Jesus can say she gave everything. I didn't say cheerfully. But Jesus can say she gave everything because he can read into the heart. And that's the point I want to leave us with today, everyone. So when we think about that great judgment day, remember it's all about the heart. And what Jesus can see, not what we can see, but what Jesus can see. And so I leave us with this question today. What is in a heart? What is in a heart? Okay? I want you to take that with you and think about it as once again in November we honor saints, souls, and the end times.